No relationship is immune to moments of misunderstanding, thoughtlessness, or unintended pain. Even in the strongest, most loving partnerships, there will inevitably be times when one partner feels hurt, neglected, or unappreciated. Not because of malice, but simply because we are imperfect human beings navigating the complexities of shared life. The true test of a relationship's strength isn't whether these moments occur, they will, but rather how both individuals choose to respond when they do. Many couples operate under the false belief that if they love each other enough, they'll never hurt one another. This unrealistic expectation sets them up for frustration and disappointment. The reality is that conflict isn't a sign of a failing relationship. It's proof that two separate individuals with unique perspectives are trying to build a life together. What separates thriving marriages from struggling ones isn't the absence of hurt, but the presence of repair. The way partners handle these inevitable moments of pain determines everything. Do they approach each other with curiosity and compassion, or defensiveness and blame? Do they see their partner's hurt as an attack to be countered, or as valuable information about how to love better? This fundamental choice, made repeatedly over time, shapes the emotional climate of the marriage far more than the occasional argument ever could. Recognizing that hurt will occur removes the shame and surprise when it happens, allowing couples to focus their energy on developing healthy response patterns. It creates space for both partners to say, "We're on the same team," even when we bump into each other. This mindset shift, from expecting perfection to embracing repair, forms the foundation for genuine intimacy and lasting connection. The healthiest relationships aren't those without wounds, but those where both partners have learned how to heal together. They understand that every moment of conflict presents a choice: to prioritize being right or to prioritize being connected. The couples who consistently choose connection, even when it's uncomfortable, are the ones who build marriages that don't just survive, but thrive. When emotional pain surfaces in a relationship, our instinctive reactions often do more harm than good. The moment one partner gathers the courage to voice their hurt, perhaps with a tentative, "When you did X, it made me feel Y," the response they receive can either bridge the distance between them or widen it irrevocably. Tragically, many relationships fall into the trap of defensiveness, where the listening partner immediately shifts into self-protection mode rather than connection mode. This defensive reaction typically manifests in three destructive ways. First comes dismissal, the subtle but devastating brush off. "You're being too sensitive," or "That's not a big deal." These phrases don't just minimize the current issue, they teach the hurt partner that their emotional experiences aren't valid or worthy of attention. Next emerges justification, where the accused partner launches into explanations about why they acted as they did. "I only did that because..." Effectively communicating that understanding their reasoning is more important than acknowledging their partner's pain. Perhaps most damaging is the factual rebuttal, where partners get stuck debating what really happened rather than addressing how each other felt. "That's not what I said," or "You're remembering it wrong." What makes this cycle so toxic is its self-perpetuating nature. When person A feels unheard, they amplify their complaints, which makes person B feel more attacked, leading to greater defensiveness. Before long, the original hurt gets buried under layers of secondary frustrations about how the conflict is being handled. Partners stop talking about what actually bothered them and start fighting about how they're fighting. The emotional toll is profound. The partner who initiated the conversation learns that vulnerability leads to invalidation. So they either stop bringing up concerns, creating distance, or express them with increasing intensity, creating more conflict. Meanwhile, the defensive partner remains trapped in a fortress of self-justification, unable to see how their reactions are damaging the trust they want to preserve. Breaking this cycle requires recognizing that defensiveness isn't just a response. It's often a trauma reaction. Many people defend because somewhere in their past, being wrong meant being unworthy. The path forward involves creating enough emotional safety that both partners can lower their guards, replacing "you're wrong" with "help me understand." And remembering that in marriage, the goal isn't to win arguments, but to win each other's hearts. Ultimately, overcoming defensiveness isn't about losing arguments. It's about winning back trust. When partners create space for each other's emotions without judgment or rebuttal, they rebuild the emotional safety that makes true intimacy possible. The choice is stark but simple. Protect your pride and lose connection, or lower your guard and regain the relationship. The healthiest couples understand that vulnerability, not victory, is the real measure of love's strength. Few behaviors damage relationships more insidiously than the habitual dismissal of a partner's feelings and perspectives. When one person consistently responds to their partner's emotional expressions with phrases like, "You shouldn't feel that way," or "That's not a big deal," they're not simply disagreeing. They're engaging in emotional invalidation that strikes at the very foundation of trust and intimacy. This pattern of dismissal communicates a devastating message. Your inner experience is incorrect, unimportant, or unworthy of consideration. The impact of this invalidation operates on multiple levels. Immediately, it leaves the expressing partner feeling unheard and emotionally isolated, as if their most vulnerable self has been rejected. Over time, this repeated experience teaches them that sharing authentic feelings leads to pain rather than connection, creating what psychologists call learned helplessness in the relationship. The dismissed partner may gradually stop bringing up concerns altogether, not because the issues have been resolved, but because they've learned their attempts at communication will be met with denial or minimization. What makes this dynamic particularly destructive is that it often occurs under the guise of helpfulness. The dismissing partner may genuinely believe they're being rational, calming, or solution focused when they say things like, "Don't be so sensitive," or "You're making too much of this." However, these responses fail to recognize a fundamental truth of human psychology. Emotions cannot be argued away. When we tell someone they shouldn't feel what they're feeling, we're not changing their emotional reality. We're simply demonstrating our unwillingness to acknowledge it. Healthy relationships require the ability to hold space for another person's subjective experience without immediately judging, correcting, or trying to fix it. This doesn't mean agreeing with every perspective or emotion, but rather validating that their feelings make sense given their unique history, temperament, and current circumstances. The shift from, "You shouldn't feel that way," to, "Help me understand why you feel that way," represents one of the most powerful transformations possible in relationship communication. The capacity to honor your partner's perspective, especially when it differs from your own, creates an atmosphere of psychological safety where vulnerability can flourish. In this environment, conflicts become opportunities for deeper understanding rather than threats to connection. Partners learn that they can disagree without being dismissive, and that multiple truths can coexist within the same relationship. This emotional maturity recognizes that validating someone's feelings doesn't require abandoning your own perspective. It simply requires making room for both. Ultimately, the practice of honoring your partner's perspective represents a profound act of love and respect. It says, "Your experience matters to me, even when I don't immediately understand it." In a world where people increasingly feel isolated and unheard, this quality of attention may be one of the most precious gifts we can offer to those we love. The choice to meet our partners with curiosity rather than correction, with openness rather than opposition, transforms relationships from battlegrounds of competing realities into sanctuaries of mutual understanding and growth. At the core of every thriving relationship lies emotional safety, that sacred space where partners feel secure enough to reveal their authentic selves without fear of judgment, rejection, or retaliation. This foundational element operates as the psychological bedrock upon which all other aspects of intimacy are built. When emotional safety exists, partners can express their deepest fears, most embarrassing mistakes, and rawest vulnerabilities, knowing they will be met with compassion rather than condemnation. Conversely, when this safety is absent, relationships inevitably deteriorate into shells of their potential, often culminating in emotional disconnection or divorce. The mechanics of emotional safety function with remarkable precision. Each interaction in a relationship either deposits into or withdraws from this emotional bank account. When a partner shares something vulnerable, whether it's admitting a personal failure, expressing an unpopular need, or revealing an insecurity, the response they receive either reinforces or erodes their sense of safety. A pattern of dismissive, critical, or indifferent reactions teaches the vulnerable partner that emotional exposure leads to pain rather than comfort. The psychological consequence is predictable, yet devastating. Self-protection replaces intimacy as the primary relational strategy. Partners may develop what attachment theorists call protective constriction, withholding parts of themselves to avoid further injury. The absence of emotional safety manifests in tangible ways throughout a relationship. Conversations become superficial as partners avoid topics that might trigger conflict. Physical intimacy often declines when emotional intimacy feels risky. Small disagreements escalate quickly because underlying hurts have nowhere safe to surface. Perhaps most tragically, partners may begin leading parallel emotional lives, physically together but psychologically alone, each guarding their true thoughts and feelings behind walls of self-preservation. Creating and maintaining emotional safety requires intentional practice. It begins with cultivating what psychologist Carl Rogers called unconditional positive regard, the ability to separate a person's worth from their actions. This means responding to your partner's vulnerabilities with curiosity rather than correction, with empathy rather than evaluation. When your partner shares something difficult, the emotionally safe response might be, "That must have been really hard for you to share. Thank you for trusting me with that," rather than immediately problem-solving or critiquing their perspective. The neuroscience behind emotional safety reveals why it's so crucial. When humans feel psychologically safe, their brains release oxytocin and other bonding chemicals that facilitate connection. When they feel threatened, even by subtle criticism or dismissal, their amygdala triggers fight-or-flight responses that inhibit vulnerability. This explains why partners who don't feel safe often seem defensive. Their brains are literally in survival mode. Rebuilding emotional safety in damaged relationships is challenging but possible. It starts with the vulnerable partner courageously expressing their need for safety. "I want to share something, but I need to know you'll just listen right now rather than give advice." And the listening partner practicing disciplined empathy. "I may not fully understand, but I can see this really matters to you." Over time, as these interactions accumulate, the relationship develops what researcher Brené Brown calls a marble jar of trust. Each positive experience adding another marble until the container overflows with security. Ultimately, emotional safety isn't a luxury in relationships. It's the oxygen that allows love to breathe. Without it, even the most passionate connections suffocate under the weight of guarded hearts and unspoken truths. With it, ordinary relationships transform into sanctuaries where two people can weather life's storms together, knowing their bond provides shelter rather than additional turbulence. In this sacred space of mutual acceptance, love doesn't just survive, it thrives. The simple phrase, "tell me more," represents one of the most powerful tools in relationship repair, a linguistic bridge that can transform conflict into connection. When partners find themselves in that tense moment where one has expressed hurt and the other feels defensive, this intentional pivot toward curiosity rather than correction changes the entire emotional trajectory of the interaction. At its core, this approach recognizes that before any problem can be solved, the hurt must first be fully understood and acknowledged. The magic lies not in the specific words themselves, but in the underlying attitude they represent. A genuine willingness to prioritize understanding over being understood. Neuroscience reveals why this approach works so effectively. When humans feel emotionally threatened, as often happens during relationship conflicts, the amygdala activates our defensive fight-flight-freeze responses. A demand like, "You need to understand why you're wrong," triggers this defensive circuitry, while an invitation like, "Help me understand your perspective," engages the prefrontal cortex, the center for reasoning and connection. This biological shift explains why empathic questioning can de-escalate tensions that logical arguments only exacerbate. The moment a partner hears, "Tell me more about why this hurt you," their nervous system begins to calm, their defenses lower, and real dialogue becomes possible. This technique works on multiple relational levels simultaneously. On the surface, it gives the hurt partner what they fundamentally crave, the experience of being heard and taken seriously. More profoundly, It reshapes the power dynamics of the conflict. Rather than positioning the partners as adversaries debating who's right, it frames them as teammates jointly investigating an emotional puzzle. The subtext becomes, we're in this together, trying to understand something important. This subtle recasting of roles often dissolves what psychologist John Gottman calls the four horsemen of relationship apocalypse: criticism, contempt, defensiveness, and stonewalling, before they can gallop through the conversation. Implementing this approach requires more than verbal technique. It demands a fundamental shift in mindset. The listening partner must temporarily suspend their own perspective, not abandon it, but shelf it, to create psychological space for their partner's experience. This resembles what psychologists call mentalization, the ability to hold in mind that another person's inner world differs from our own. When done authentically, the effects can be profound. Partners report feeling seen in ways they haven't experienced before. Conflicts that might have previously escalated into multi-day standoffs often resolve more quickly because the root hurt gets addressed rather than the surface argument. The practical application involves specific learnable skills. 1. Pausing before responding to override the defensive impulse. 2. Asking open-ended questions that invite elaboration. What was that like for you? 3. Practicing reflective listening. So what I'm hearing is 4. Validating before problem solving. That makes sense, you'd feel that way. While simple in concept, this approach proves challenging in practice because it requires vulnerability. The willingness to temporarily set aside one's own defenses to fully attend to another's pain, yet the rewards justify the effort. Couples who master this skill often find their conflicts become shorter, less intense, and more productive. More importantly, they create a relational environment where both partners feel safe to bring their authentic selves, hurts, needs, and all, knowing they'll be met with curiosity rather than condemnation. In this way, tell me more becomes more than a conflict resolution tactic. It becomes the language of enduring love. At the heart of every healthy relationship lies a paradoxical truth. Conflicts, when handled with emotional intelligence, become the very building blocks of deeper intimacy. Couples who master this art understand that disagreements aren't threats to their bond, but rather valuable opportunities to understand each other's inner worlds more profoundly. The key lies in shifting perspective. Rather than viewing arguments as battles to be won, they approach them as excavations of unmet needs and hidden hurts. When one partner expresses anger, the emotionally mature response isn't to match their intensity, but to gently uncover the vulnerable emotions beneath the surface. The fear of abandonment, perhaps, or the longing to feel valued. This process of emotional archaeology transforms reactive fights into moments of genuine connection, where both partners feel seen and understood at their core. Few relationship skills carry as much transformative potential as the ability to offer a sincere, emotionally attuned apology. A truly healing apology goes far beyond a perfunctory, sorry. It creates a sacred space where hurts can be acknowledged and repaired. The most powerful apologies contain several key elements. They take full responsibility without hiding behind intentions. I didn't mean to hurt you, but I see that I did. Express genuine remorse for the impact of one's actions, and most importantly, invite further dialogue about the hurt. Can you help me understand how this affected you? What makes this type of apology so disarming is its radical focus on the injured partner's experience rather than the apologizer's excuses. When done well, it doesn't just settle a conflict. It actually strengthens the relationship by demonstrating that maintaining connection matters more than protecting one's ego. The secret to lasting relationship improvement lies not in grand gestures, but in the daily practice of small, intentional acts of love and attention. Transformative change begins with simple, actionable steps that gradually reshape the emotional landscape of a relationship. Something as basic as asking, "What's one thing I could do this week to make you feel more loved?" can open channels of communication that may have been blocked for years. Practicing active listening, where the focus is on understanding rather than rebutting, creates new neural pathways of connection. Even the act of researching, How to build emotional intimacy, and implementing one suggestion signals a powerful commitment to growth. These micro interventions succeed where dramatic overhauls often fail because they're sustainable. They build positive momentum, and most importantly, they demonstrate through consistent action that the relationship matters. Over time, these small deposits into the emotional bank account compound into a fortune of trust and intimacy that can weather any storm. Each of these practices, using conflict as a pathway to understanding, mastering the art of repair through authentic apology, and committing to small daily acts of connection, represents a different facet of the same truth. That love isn't a static state, but a skill to be cultivated. The couples who thrive aren't those who avoid challenges, but those who develop the tools to navigate them with grace, humility, and an unwavering commitment to each other's emotional well-being. Every long-term relationship eventually arrives at a fundamental crossroads where partners must choose between two paths: the difficult but rewarding journey of mutual growth, or the slow, insidious drift toward emotional separation. This pivotal choice presents itself not in dramatic moments of crisis, but in the quiet, everyday decisions, whether to respond defensively or with curiosity when criticized, to prioritize being understood or to seek understanding first, to nurse grievances or to extend grace. The marriages that flourish are those where both individuals consistently choose humility over pride, empathy over indifference, and intentional effort over complacency. Research confirms what wise couples have always known. Relationships crumble not from lack of love, but from the accumulation of unaddressed hurts, the tyranny of unmet needs, and the corrosive effects of emotional laziness. The haunting question that lingers in every conflict: do I want to be right, or do I want to be close? Cuts to the heart of relational wisdom, exposing the illusion that proving your point could ever be more valuable than preserving your connection. As the curtain falls on this exploration of relationship repair, the call to action rings with both urgency and hope. Begin today with one small, deliberate act of love. The erosion of intimacy happens gradually, through forgotten anniversaries that go unmentioned, through sighs left unexamined, through the 1,000 tiny neglects we justify as being too busy. But the restoration of connection can begin just as incrementally, with a single decision to break old patterns. Perhaps it starts with replacing "that's not what happened" with "help me understand why you feel that way." Maybe it's the courage to ask, "have I made you feel unimportant lately?" And then listening without defense. These micro shifts in awareness and behavior accumulate like compound interest, slowly rebuilding what indifference has worn away. The sobering truth: you can't fix what you don't acknowledge, serves as both warning and compass, reminding us that denial is the silent killer of love, while clear-eyed awareness is the foundation of all meaningful repair. The choice to act, however modestly, today rather than tomorrow, transforms spectators of their own relationships into architects of a new, more vibrant connection. One honest conversation, one vulnerable admission, one sincere apology at a time. This is how great love stories are written. Not through perfect harmony, but through the daily courage to choose each other over the easy comforts of ego, to water the garden of the relationship even when no one appears to be watching, and to believe that small acts of emotional bravery can resurrect what neglect has nearly extinguished. The time to begin is now. The opportunity to grow closer still exists. The next chapter waits to be written by the choices you make today. If today's conversation touched something inside you, don't keep it to yourself. Like, share, and subscribe so we can keep these honest conversations going. And if you have a story of your own, or need advice on something you're carrying in silence, drop it in the comments. I read every word, and who knows, your story might become the next video that helps someone feel a little less alone. This is Marriage Matters, and your voice matters here.